How are
Hey, I'm
you?
good. I am good. Thank you again for welcoming me into your classroom.
Yes, thank you.
I enjoyed seeing your students engage with verbals, and
Hmm.
it is clear that they were really thinking about it and not just at the surface level. Um, but before I share what I noticed, how
Hmm.
do you feel the lesson went?
Well, I think first of all, thank you for coming in
You are
and
welcome.
just
My
truly
pleasure.
being there, assisting in all your knowledge. But I think overall it went well. I know that there were some parts that they were that kind of need to get cleared up from me introducing it earlier in the year. They were definitely struggling with participles. That was the main takeaway from that lesson. But I just wasn't sure how to explain the differences between the two. I mean, between all three of them. But I am hopeful that they did learn something from that session.
Very good. That's a great reflection. And I actually noticed the same thing.
Hmm.
Their confidence with gerunds was much stronger than it was with
Right.
participles, especially when it came to explaining their function.
Hmm.
That moment when you paused and then you had to reteach and you pulled out that anchor chart, I
Hmm.
thought that was a very smart teacher move. But can we talk a bit about how you knew to do that in that moment? How were you checking for understanding in that moment?
So in that time when the anchor chart was pulled out, I realized the responses that I was getting from gerunds and infinitives, it was quicker. They were, the class was just they were spitting them out. But when it got to the participles, it was more quiet. Just reading the room and just
Right.
knowing, my students and how I know when they're confident, they perk up, and then when they're not, they kind of shy back down. And so that's when, using the anchor chart, it was one of those things where it was just like, okay, let's just go ahead and go back to the basics.
Yes.
And that's what we did, the first time we went over the lesson. And so that was one of the ways I just kind of, read my kids. I looked at the faces. I looked at, some of the ones that's usually immediate to answer. They were even kind of, confused. And so, yeah, that anchor chart was it was my saving grace in that moment, just to give them a visual.
So the fact that you picked up on that when you had them doing the turn and talk,
Yes.
and then once you noticed that the responses were not according to your expectations, then you quickly moved into, okay, let me back up.
Yes. And I like how you did mention the turn and talk, because that was definitely a critical indicator. As we all were walking around, I was able to hear some responses, because the way they were grouped, you have your strong partners and you have those that's still learning, still catching on.
Right.
And so I could tell, with those that I were able to hear in the turn and talk, some of them weren't talking as much as others, and that was another thing. So their faces, just knowing, just their confidence level, and then the turn and talk was more like a, I don't know, So
Right.
it wasn't as effective as it could have been, which let me know, okay, this is one of those verbals that they're struggling with.
I was definitely tracking that too. You said tell your partner what type of verbal this is and how it's functioning. And then as you were walking around, I walked around as well. And then I heard some strong explanations, but then like you said, there were just a few that were, I don't know, I'm just
Right.
kind of going along with this. But something that you might consider doing next time in the future is once they get done, consider selecting maybe one or two groups to just kind of share out, just to see where everyone is. That'll give you a chance to check for accuracy. That'll give the students a chance to check for accuracy. Okay, is my thinking, am I on the right track? Just a
That's good.
suggestion, for next time.
Yeah.
Just to kind of see how the kids were processing everything.
That's a good idea. I didn't want to put any kids, on the spot and cold call, all of them.
Right.
But like you said, there were some that did know it, and there were some that were a little unsure. And so those who were confident in it, they can definitely share. They could have shared with the class. So that's a good point. Thank you.
This
for
is your
noticing that.
confident students' time to shine. Those
Right.
ones that want to
Yeah.
volunteer all the time and go first. The ones that I know you got it, but let me see if everyone else, that's their time to shine. So perhaps let them start by first modeling, and then once they kind of come out to kind of warm,
Okay.
everyone up, and maybe follow up with someone who's still working, or someone that you truly want to see how are they
Okay.
how are they doing in regard to this.
That's a good point.
So what about during your partner activity? How did your checklist strategy go?
Okay, so there were some mixed results. As I was walking around checking conversation, just looking at their work, reviewing for comprehension. I didn't get to every group. The ones that I did, got a chance to hear, it seemed like they were working pretty well together. But I was pulled away with helping more individual groups. I want to teach them all, start doing
Right.
demonstrations with small grouping. And so I wasn't able to get everyone's responses. So it was mixed results. It went well, but it's some things that probably need to be tweaked in that with that type of lesson style. But overall, the data that I did collect was good. I just wish I would have collected a little bit more.
And that's really common, especially as you're going through the lesson, and then other students' needs kind of develop. But I did track 8 pairs during that time, and I did note whether they were able to correctly identify the verbal and its function in the 3 sentences that you gave them. And 5 of the 8 pairs got 2 or more right. So 5 of the 8 got 2 or more right. But the biggest confusion, like we've said all along, was with the participial phrases functioning as adjectives. And I just wrote some quick notes. Gerunds, most students could spot and say that it acts like a noun. Infinitives, it was kind of mixed results. The students could identify the infinitives easily, but they struggled with the function. Participles, the most common error was thinking that it was the main verb.
Right.
And they really get those two. And I just made a little data chart just so you can kind of see how I was able to go through and track the groups. That's just all 3 of the groups. I just put a little tally if each of them got the question correct, or if they did not get the correct, what their response was. So I'll definitely want you to take a look at this so you can just kind of see how I was able to track just really quick during the lesson.
Okay, thank you.
So based on this, where do you think you might adjust next time? Either something that you may adjust instructionally, or something that you may adjust in terms of just checking for understanding. Where might you make adjustments just based on this data?
So based off of the data that you showed me, which thank you for that, that's very helpful.
Absolutely.
I think I just want to slow down. Just be able to introduce the participles first and really focus on one at a time versus introducing all 3. I think that'd be easier for them to digest. And just, as far as the CFUs, I like your idea about having the specific students turn around, during the turnaround and talk, have those students who are confident, let them shine. So that way it can kind of boost the morale of the classroom as well, and, help the other students know, okay, well, I didn't get it like that, but maybe my peers sharing it, that kind of might help them understand a better way versus whole class instruction. And so I think that's something that I would probably shift more, with just allowing my students to be able to explain in their own way.
That makes sense. What do you think about planning like a mid-lesson check the next time? Something that's more formal. For example, like maybe I know you mentioned using the mini whiteboards, not having enough of those. Maybe
I got some now.
More
I got some
of those. Or maybe like instead of doing your exit ticket at the end of the lesson, maybe give them a 3-question assessment, during the lesson, so that you can go ahead and address those misconceptions before the next day. You can address them immediately. What do you think about something like that?
I think that'll be helpful to know exactly where we are in the lesson. Sometimes it's easy to just go on with the lesson and just keep pushing, even though, kids are not really picking it up. I like that idea of the mid lesson, midway lesson. Also like the whiteboard, idea as well. I was able to get some more in.
Good.
Yeah, I was able to get some more in, and so I think that would be a good way to kind of force them, but not force them. Just allow them to be able to commit to their own answer. Right. Even with the turnaround and talk, I like that as well. But again, it's still not able to get their own true individual response. And so I like that midway. I think that's a great idea. Midpoint, let's go ahead and see where you are. So that way, that'll determine how the next rest of the class is going to go.
It's something that's fast. It's visible. You can see it right there, during instruction. Use your immediate data. You can pivot quickly if you need to. But overall, your lesson was clear. It was well paced. It was student centered. You also made that great teacher move by adjusting your lesson mid-lesson, pulling out that anchor chart, going back to the drawing board based on what you heard, and that's exactly that's responsive instruction.
Right.
What's one small move that you may want to make in your next lesson?
I think going back to again what you said about the turnaround and talk, because I'm so used to just whole class cold call, put you on the spot, you know it or you don't, know. I think with me implementing more of the turnaround and talk, and as well as just combining that with the white boys, I think that would be a double combo. I think that would really be effective for the students and me understanding if they know it, because I'm here to teach them, but at the same time I need to know what to teach them. And so I think going back for the next lesson, that's something that I would try to implement more of, versus again going from the whole class and walking around, yes, but again I wasn't able to pick up everything, and thankfully you were there, you were able to pick up more of the data. But definitely going back in with those two power moves, and then I think that'll help go over the functions of the verbals, especially that participles.
And that's a very strong move. That's a strong next step. What you mentioned. I'll check back in after that lesson.
Okay.
Just to kind of reflect on how it worked. And would you be open to co-planning that portion together? Just to kind of put our brains together and jog our ideas. So I'll definitely send you over a few sample ideas and a sample CFU for you to review. But thanks again for your thoughtful reflection today. You're making some intentional moves in your classroom and your instruction, and I'm just excited to continue to see your growth.
Hey, thank you so much, Ms. Davenport.
You're welcome.